Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Do you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Today we gathered to discuss a topic that is not only important for Ukraine, but also could create some opportunities to other countries. The topic is climate policy as a framework for Ukraine's green recovery. My name is Vladislav Antipov. I'm head of Environmental Committee of Chamber of Commerce of Ukraine. And before we start, I want to say thank you to NDC Partnership for your support of Ukraine in achieving of our climate goals. NDC Partnership is bringing together more than 200 members, including more than 130 countries and nearly 100 institutions driving global climate action. We want to start from the video message from the Minister of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine, Svetlana Grinchuk.
33 months of war. "33 months of Russians' ecocide on Ukrainian territory. When the Russians blow up the Kakhovka dam, the first thought was, did they really do it? Second thought was, what's next? We ask ourselves, what's next every time the enemy mines the Black Sea and our land? When smoke from fires covers the horizon, when our protected areas and the whole environment are being destroyed. We ask what's next, and will this ecological disaster become irreversible? These questions are not rhetorical. There is an answer. Despite the war, we are demining territories. We are rebuilding our cities. We are restoring ecosystems. We declared to achieve climate neutrality during the next 25 years. We adopted the 10 years climate policy strategy and the framework climate law. We introduced climate innovations. We are looking every time for non-standard sustainable solutions. Our response to attacks on our energy infrastructure is the development of renewable energy. We digitize, we decarbonize, remaining a reliable partner in a global fight against climate change. And we know how to ensure environmental safety. This is exactly what the 8th point of Ukrainian peace formula is about. This is our effective mechanism, our protection, and guarantees that the whole world needs. Almost 60 countries are already working with us on its implementation, but more efforts are needed. So that the crime of ecocide will not be repeated, so that the one who destroys the environment will answer for this crime.
Thank you. Let me introduce our speakers for today's panel. The first is Alexei Ryabchin, advisor to the Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine, Minister of Justice of Ukraine. Please, Alexei. Svetlana Sushko, Head of Reform Supporting Team at the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine. Evgenia Kopytsa, professor, legal researcher specializing in environmental, climate and energy law for an international European and Ukrainian perspective. Victoria Yashkina, regional climate change specialist, UNDP. And Leonard de Klerk, lead author of the initiative on GSG accounting of the war. Thank you for joining us. And I want to make some small intro to make the way of our discussion. Ukraine's destroyed cities, factories, energy networks need to be rebuilt, and reconstruction should be in a green way. Sustainable recovery will be the foundation for future Ukraine prosperity. As for now, Ukraine have a lot of frame documents, such as updated NDC, as long-term low emissions development strategy of Ukraine until 2050, national energy climate plan, and others. And I want to discuss with you how all these frame documents or other issues, our goals, could help in green recovery of Ukraine. And first, I want to ask Alexei. Alexei, in government, the person responsible for Euro integration, one of the person who is responsible for Euro integration, and especially for climate issues, could you explain what is going on now with Euro integration and how it would help with the green recovery of Ukraine? The floor is yours.
Yes, thanks for having me. Yes, I would say that the Ministry of Environment isn't fully in charge of the climate policies in Ukraine, but what I observed for the last several years that it becomes so popular that the energy ministry is also fighting with the environmental ministry to be the lead on a climate. Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Transport, like Ministry of Agriculture is also trying to become more green and clean. So I would say that this is already a mainstreamed issue among the Ukrainian government. Specifically, after this year, we introduced the climate change law and adopted it in our parliament with the climate target 2050. It became the obligatory to synchronize all of the governmental plan with this goal. Yes, of course, this goal is not integral. I would say just just a political aspiration. We need to do a lot of plans, a lot of strategies, a lot of analysis in order to push the governmental course toward the climate neutrality. But nevertheless, it's really hard to speak about environment and climate during the war. And today it's a 1,000th day of war. For us, it's a very sad date. But I would say that one may say that the environment and climate is not what you do prioritize during the war. But in Ukraine, we do, because this is a question of our recovery, which we call green recovery or build back better, build back greener. There are lots of terminology towards the recovery, but the goal is the same. We need to decrease the amount of CO2. We need to increase amount of green megawatts in place. We need to decrease the energy consumption, and we need to make biodiversity, water management, air pollution, according to the best European standards. For this, we have our great partners who are helping us from the whole world through bilateral finance, through multilateral finance, or through the program that is that hosting us in the pavilion with the NDC partnership, who is helping, to match a lot of issues and provide finance for us. And European integration is the key here. So we have climate neutrality, which is a global goal. We have the European integration, which is our aspiration, and we are moving toward this. We have the green recovery, which coincides into the governmental plans, and we're already the accession country, so we changed the status 3 months ago. Not only we become the candidate country, and in half of a year we will have a second stage of our official Euro integration process, which is called the bilateral screening in the 27th chapter, which is environment and climate change, and the government and the Ministry of Environment is presenting their level of implementation of the key, to open the negotiation according to this cluster, to write an NPA, National Plan for approximating the key, and this might help us to negotiate to become a member of the European Union. Our goal is as soon as possible. Usually, it will take countries from granting an accession status from 3 to 4 to 5 years. According to the previous experience, we're already 1 year in this process, and this will mainstream a lot of processes regarding the climate change and environment.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexei. I will maybe come back to you, but we moving forward. And frankly speaking, I'm not very experienced moderator, so I have made a few notes for me on the wall. Ukraine is striving to urgently turn commitment into action and continue rising its bar. Svetlana, I want to ask you, we have a lot of frame documents, as was discussed before, but what should Ukraine actually do in the way of green recovery, and how reform support team could help in this? Please, the floor is in you.
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for being invited here in this very timely and important discussion for Ukraine. I would probably start from the to add a little one more corner point of view to the words which Alexei started to say, what is needed for green recovery. And he was talking about this cross-sectoral cooperation of the ministry, but I think also it's very important when you talk about climate and green recovery to think about cross-sectoral approach within the planning, all the documents, and also in the implementation of that policies. And when I'm talking about this, I mean, I would like to explain what exactly reform support do, because we are taking care of this point of view for green recovery. So we are working within the ministry with 9 reforms and 5 cross-sectoral streams. And this all 9 reforms, they are for Euro integration of Ukraine, and also for this is a priority of the government of Ukraine and the ministry itself. And with these 9 reforms, we try to put cross-sectoral issue of climate. I will not go now through all the 9 reforms, but I would like to give some example which are now the priority for the government, and they were put on the table as a priority by the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. It's the reform of the water sector, it's a reform of waste management, and it's our industrial pollution, which is now going on and is one of the indicator of Ukraine facility. So in all these 3 sectors, the priority sectors, the RST, which we are the team of 23 experts, both lawyers, analytics, technical expertise support, etc. In all these 3 areas, which are very connected to the climate issues, we try to have this cross-sectoral climate approach. When we are talking about the waste management, we talk about methane policy, and we try to put it together, and we try to when we are we're helping the ministry to develop the methane reduction plan. We were checking out the baseline exactly for the waste management sector. Even it's very popular to talk more about the energy sector when we talk about methane. If we go to the industrial pollution reform, which, by the way, the law was adopted not so long time ago in August of this year, and now we are actually working very much on with the GIZ project together and BAT for Ukraine. We are working on more than 25 bylaws to make this law start to work, actually, to start this mechanism, and also 34 BAT, which actually concern each sphere and each sector. And if we talk about this reform, we understand that even the directive by itself, by the Article 9, says that all the climate and GHG issues are regulated with a separate directive, 87, sorry. Even there, we start to put already the linkages with the new technologies and climate decisions and climate solutions, how it can be linked, especially because in Ukraine, for now, we don't have ETS, which could solve that problem and BAT could go separately. But because it's not yet on the place, we are trying to linkage it and try to understand how to on practice, which was a question, how the entity, how the installation does not need to implement first BAT, which pays one time, second, all climate solution pays second time, and then there is a cycle of changing of BAT, and they need to pay third time. So we try to understand this linkage that in practice, when the installation now is going to implement all the needed regulation, they need to take into account also this climate solutions and calculate this all together for now. And if we talk about the reform of water, it's also absolutely direct linkage with the climate policy, and RST also supports this issue within the framework of resilience to climate problems. So I will not go to other priorities. I just also wanted to mention that in framework of the green recovery, we now in RST developed the draft methodological recommendation which collect the indicators to criteria and indicators and requirements, what is green and how to define this green and put it on the table for the society discussion that everyone understands green the same. We collected these criteria and indicators from the best practices of the international documents and also the requirements of the world famous financial institutions. And we hope to present it soon to start the discussion of what is green recovery and how it should be measured. Thank you.
Thank you, Svetlana. And I have additional question. Could you specify the source of financing? You said about that BAT should be implemented, climate measures should be implemented, and you said about the financial institutions. So could you a little bit detail this topic and which financial institutions, how it could be financed?
What I see, thank you for your question. What I see now for Ukraine, there is no problem with money. If some idea needs to be implemented, need to be in place, I see how Ukrainians by itself, Ukraine as a government, we all are as a citizen and a country try to find solution and we find it. The same I can say about the industry. It's have never been easy issue in any country. Nobody came and say, okay, tomorrow I start to modernize, put this whole climate solution in place, and tomorrow find the money and modernize. Every country had this issue, and a big discussion was within the government and within the business. First question is to understand which sectors are the priorities for Ukraine in future. And unfortunately, till now, there is no clear vision. What are their priorities? How do we see Ukraine in 5 years? It's still steel and cement on the first place or not? If yes, then we need to try all together to find this solution, and government and financial institutions need to be in this discussion because then it's become the priority of the government as of the country, and we trying to find the money to develop this priority sectors. If it's not steel and cement, maybe then we don't need to modernize them in these 2-3 years because they are not going to survive the competition in the world. So I would start from the prioritization, then understanding how much it costs, and then try to find a common solution, what we do in that. And this discussion, you know this very well, in Ukraine is already 15 years on the table, but before the war, it was much easier to just continue and let's say, choose a which doesn't require much more efforts. But for now, situation changed. We know about the CBAM, we know the other markets we can't now have a trade. So the situation changed in such way that we all now need to choose the vision, what the priorities, and then to understand how to find the money.
Thank you, Svetlana. And as a representative of business, I could especially thank you for highlighting of this topic, because we are in a long-term discussion with our government about prioritizing of industries. And we understand our government that during the war, it's difficult to make some long-term strategies, long-term prioritization. But we should do this together, everybody, because without this, we have no a clear way where to go. We understand that it should be green way, but which green way? Thank you, Svetlana. And now I want to talk with Evgenia Kapitsa. Evgenia, we talked about NDC, but NDCs are not legally binded for the countries, and a lot of depends of domestic policies. But Ukraine has updated its NDC. We are going this way. What advantages it could give to Ukraine, and how it could help in green recovery of Ukraine? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Well, first of all, NDC is the guideline for Ukraine. And as far as Ukraine has always been committed to European values and has always been aligned with the vision of European integration, we were always looking and have been doing the past job in alignment of our legislation with the European Union one and international one. So once we didn't have the national policies and national legal framework before this year, we didn't have the framework climate law. Most of our the actions in the climate area was driven by our international obligations. So NDC is actually the key lighthouse for us to continue moving forward, and we can't afford ourselves not to do the green recovery and reconstruction, not only because we're committed to that, but it's because we are aligned with the international obligations that we have to address. But aside of these, yes, NDCs, they are not legally binding, and they not envision the enforcing mechanisms for the countries, and a lot depends on the national and domestic policies as it is. But we should keep in mind that NDCs, it's a lot about the collective action. And here we are in NDC Pavilion, and we can see that we are in the sea pavilion of the partnership. And while Ukraine is committed, and I have been, as a legal scholar, I have been watching the advancement of Ukraine's legislation of policies in climate area. So our previous NDC that was adopted in 2021, it was called unambitious. It was not aligned with 1.5 vision. None of the NDCs in the world now is currently aligned with 1.5 vision. Unfortunately, we have reached this threshold, but Ukraine keeps being committed, but we can't do it alone. And I think a lot depends, and I think Leonard would be the better person to talk about that. But before coming here, I didn't expect that much from this COP on the advancement of the financing, but at least I was very much hopeful for the countries' NDCs to be more ambitious. But I still see the lack of the commitment of the countries to include into the national NDCs the war-related emissions, which is super important. We have been talking a lot about that countries that are in the conflict and fragile states, that they are on the front lines of the climate action. We do talk about this a lot. Everybody understands how much this peace, security, and climate nexus is intertwined. Ukraine is showcasing the whole world about that, but still we haven't seen the progress on the legislative part on that. So I would say that NDC being the instrument to guide Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction, and it's not the question either or, but it's one of the things that we really need to work all together. And Ukraine's ambitious NDC, the country in war that pledged to go climate neutral and pledged to have net zero by 2050, I think this is a great message to the international partners that, hey, Ukraine is doing it during the war. We have aligned all of our legislation network. Yes, we will have to do a little bit of the home task afterwards. We will have to align our secondary legislation. We have to be sure that this ambition that we had pledged in our climate framework law is aligned with the businesses. We have to have, but we have the political will. We have the legal instruments. They are very likely to be there in line. And like, again, I have always been talking that Ukrainian legislation is not bad. Laws are not bad. The way how we apply it can be imperfect. So in this case, we should see the will from international partnerships to commit to advancing the climate action. Because we are all on the front line, and Ukraine is on the front line first and foremost, but every single country is on the front line of fighting the bigger war. Like, climate change is the war, and it's not only Ukraine that is fighting. So it can, but we should ensure that other countries are taking Ukraine's experiences and respond collectively and continue being committed that indices that they will pledge next year in Brazil would be implemented into real life. So we should stop talking big words, but we should support it with action. And the time to act is now. And Ukraine, is none of any other country knows it the best.
Thank you, Evgenia. You said that we have a good laws, but not perfect implementation. What could Ukraine do to improve implementation of the laws? And just briefly, some general key points for us.
I would pick up the point education.
Education.
Yes, because I think that legal enforcement means a lot. But provided that there is the political will again, and that there is the will of the businesses to stop shifting from business as usual and being open to innovative technologies, best available solutions. And a couple of years ago, businesses were not interested in that because they didn't even know what we're talking about. And the same was happening with different other stakeholders. And I was observing the rise of the awareness among students I was teaching to, among businesses, only the recent years. And unfortunately, had the war to happen in 2020, the full Russian-scale invasion to happen in 2022, that gave the boost of the awareness of environmental issues and climate issues in Ukraine. But it's still not enough, and I think we could hear it from all of the different discussions in Ukraine's pavilions as well, that while the growing consciousness is there, there is still people should be educated. People not like when we're talking about education, it's not about the students, it's not about the pupils, it's about educating policymakers as well. And it's about the importance of academic knowledge being bridging the gap between the evidence-based research and then policy practices, and kind of engage with the policymakers and legislators to make them understand why it is important, to make it prioritized. And I have to acknowledge the Reform Support Office is doing the great job in that. So thank you very much for being there, explaining the higher levels of government in Ukraine, why it is important. And you started this job much long before we saw the advancements, and now we can see that it is working. So thank you very much for that. Because again, it is a lot about the collective action. So we should mobilize all of the resources possible and bring them around the table and remember that provided we understand what we're talking about, we will have the goals achieved.
Thank you, Eugenia. This is the best answer which could be given. Really, education, young people, is the foundation, is the base of sustainable development. So totally agree with you. This is great. And we're going further to Victoria Yashkina, Regional Climate Change Specialist, UNDP. Victoria, yesterday I was on your presentation, on your speech, and it was great. It was about long-term, low-emission development strategy. And I want to ask you to clarify now what is this? LETS, yeah, you call it LETS shortly, and how it could help in the green recovery of Ukraine, how it could support us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me for this important discussion. Well, first of all, I'd like to remark we addressed where we are here today in the NDC Partnership Pavilion, and through the NDC Partnership call, UNDP supports Ukrainian government with this long-term low-emission development strategy development. And there are a lot of preconditions for this strategy to be developed in Ukraine. There was one already developed back in 2018. So this would be the second revision of it. So first of all, it's a Paris Agreement which requires the country to develop this mid-century net zero emission vision of the country. Secondly, there is the requirements under the European Union regulation on energy and climate governance. Also, it's included in the framework climate law that was recently adopted by Ukrainian parliament. In addition, it's the part of Ukraine's facility. So I think there are a lot of requirements for Ukrainian country to have this vision. And I would focus on this world vision instead of strategy, because the strategy would not fit like only the document which Ukraine is obliged to do, but I would like to focus on the ownership of the whole society to what is in there, of all the sectors, all of the, as it would inform NDC, it would inform sectoral strategies, it would inform labor and social policy, then the adaptation policy as well, and it would also comprise a lot of financial needs. So I've read briefly the presentation Alexandri shared with me, and the numbers are huge. It's like 1.1 trillion euro investments needed by 2050, and it's about 10 billion euro really yearly investments. But it's not about like that we are asking those money. As Svetlana mentioned, the raw money. We already have those money. We need to channel them properly. We need to channel them taking in mind that every new business which will invest in Ukraine's recovery should be resilient, should be lower emission, should address adaptation and mitigation, and also should address just transition, because we will have a lot of a need to reskill those who are back from the front lines. We would need to add new educational courses, new educational lines, and we will need to also address gender issues in the whole process to make sure that women and other vulnerable groups are part of this approach. So let's not think about this as a strategy, but as the lighthouse, right? The lighthouse for the whole society, the vision of the future. And yeah, as I said yesterday, it's very much hard to plan ahead individually for every Ukrainian. Nobody knows what's going to be tomorrow or 2050, oh my God. But we really managed to dream of a green future, to dream of the future we want, and we want for us and for our children. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I want to add that we should dream in, but also we should turn our dream into action. And my question for you, we talked with Svetlana about prioritizing. And for your opinion, which industries have the most potential for decreasing of GHG emissions, or which industry should be in priority for the low carbon strategy?
Well, I would first say that a lot of industries will be either totally vanished in Ukraine, like coal mining, and new industries to emerge in IT and agriculture. So I think this is the first task to the government, to talk about those priorities with the business and with people and actually prioritize, so that not government decides, but the whole nation decides which is to be the top contributor to Ukraine's economy and Ukraine's resilience.
So we should be in transparent, open discussion. I mean, government, business, society, and together we should decide where
Yes.
our priorities.
Yes.
Okay.
It's doable only when there is an ownership of the whole country to the document. If not, then it's just laid as a paper.
I totally agree, because from my opinion, sustainable development is possible only in an open society, in inclusive society. So if somebody, government or business or NGOs will decide some strategic issues in our country, so it will not be sustainable, because somebody will be unhappy with this. Thank you very much, Victoria.
Thank you.
And please give the microphone to Mr. Leonard. Hi, Leonard. Nice to meet you here.
Hi, good morning.
We know each other a lot of years. And before, you worked in the field of joint implementation projects under Kyoto Protocol. And also you run a climate neutral holiday resort in Hungary. But today I want to ask you about your activities, because as Alexei said, today is the 1000th day of war, Russia against Ukraine. And you are lead also of initiative on GSG accounting of the war. And you research how Russia's war in Ukraine worsened the climate crisis through additional GSG emissions. Could you give us key points of your research and how to recover all this damage which was done by the Russia? The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Indeed, you know, when the war broke out, we started this initiative to show the world what the impact of this war is. And of course, we all realize that, you know, it is Ukraine, the Ukrainians that are mostly impacted by this act of aggression through the death of people, the destruction of the infrastructure, but also Ukraine is now leading the way in showing what an armed conflict, how it can impact the environment through the pollution of air, the pollution of soil, and the pollution of water. So in that sense, Ukraine is really, you know, leading the way and showing the world what a war can cause. We wanted to do this exercise because we realized that a large conflict causes a significant amount of emissions. And as we all know, climate change is a global issue. So it's not only impacting Ukraine and Ukrainians, but these additional emissions are worsening the climate crisis. While the emissions should go down very steeply and fast, it's only pushing the emissions the wrong way. So by this way, and that's how we started with our work, we tried to show the world the transboundary impact, basically, of Russia's aggression. But secondly, and as we were working on it, and that's also relevant, I would say, for NDCs, we've identified several sources of emissions. Warfare is significant. Unfortunately, they have happened and they're still happening, so we cannot, undo that damage that has been done. Another important source of emissions is wildfires in landscapes, and this is mainly in forests. So we've seen now along the front line there are many ignition points. So a fire gets started. A fire extinguish is not possible because it's a war zone. It's an inaccessible area. So not only the fire can go on for a very long time, but it's also more intensive and also spreads out to larger areas. So the damage is significant in the loss of stored carbon, basically, that is emitted into the atmosphere. Now, and I have to add, because the numbers that have we here, the 180 million tons of CO2 is of 24 months of war. We're already passing, we're now in the 33rd month, 1,000 days of war. And we had a very bad fire season, actually, also this summer. It was a very hot and very, very dry summer, meaning that all these ignition points and all this, firing of ammunition exacerbated the loss of biomass. And in terms of recovery, Ukraine is planning to, reforest those lost forests. But it's very interesting to see now that in Ukraine you already have a discussion: how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this in a climate resilient way? Because we are seeing now all over the world a lot of forest fires due to climate change, but also because it are very monotonous forests. So the forests at the front line, for example, they are coniferous forests, very monotone, one type, replanted, and it's very easily for them to catch fire, and they are very sensitive to the effects of climate change. So there's now already a lot of very interesting thinking on how can we replant the forest in such a way that it's also resilient to the change of the climate that we are expecting in the coming 10, 20, 30 years. So NDCs, and I also think that in the Ukrainian NDC this should be an important element. The other finding was that another large source of emissions are actually lie in the future. That is for the reconstruction of everything that was destroyed in terms of buildings, schools, hospitals, roads, etc., etc. These are future emissions, and this is mainly for 80%. It's the emissions for the production of the steel and the cement that you need. Now, here lies an opportunity. Do we have a possibility to avoid these emissions to happen if we do it in a green way? And really a little bit, as a non-Ukrainian, a little bit of an outsider, every time I go to Ukraine, I'm so impressed and surprised how much thinking there is already going. How are we going to do it in a more smarter and a greener way? And it's not only, of course, a lot of focus is on energy efficiency, which is a good thing, and having renewable energy. But also what I mentioned is the construction emissions. There is this opportunity, for example, by using alternative building materials. And, one of the latest developments is using hemp as a construction material. It is not only low carbon, actually it is carbon negative, because when the hemp grows, it takes out the CO2 and stores that in the building. Ukraine is an agricultural powerhouse, so it has the land, the knowledge to grow the hemp themselves, so it doesn't have to be imported. And I really think that this is a great opportunity for Ukraine to do this reconstruction in actually a climate negative, meaning in a positive way, but with negative emissions. So there I see two great developments. Coming back to accountability, because the 180 million tons, I think by now we are way over the 200 million tons. About 2/3 happen on the territory of Ukraine. And of course you do have this question now, and I expect Ukraine to be reporting those emissions, because Ukraine takes climate change serious, contrary to a large neighboring country. But of course, Ukraine should not be responsible for those emissions, because they were basically forced upon them. So that's also what we've now working on in seeing how we can hold the aggressor accountable for those emissions to happen. That's why yesterday we've launched a methodology, because we have to, provide solid evidence to whatever litigation proceeding we are starting. We have to provide solid evidence that these emissions really happened and can be attributed to the war. So that's what we launched yesterday at a side event together with Ukraine. But also, it is a way of sharing the experience of Ukraine with other conflict-impacted states, so that also they can use now this tool that is available, that is free to use, and see if they are impacted by an armed conflict, what impact does it have on the climate, how many emissions we're talking about. Because, as you might know, as of today, we have 110 armed conflicts around the world. Some of them are low intensity, some of them are high intensity, but unfortunately, we're still not living in a conflict-free world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonard. And as I understood, you said that front line is line in the place where forest is not too resilient to the fire. And Ukrainian army now trying to move the front line to the place where forest more resilient, somewhere in Kursk Oblast. We want to have a war over there because forests there are have better resilience. And Leonard, thank you very much. And my question is, how do you think, is it realistic to achieve some reimbursement from aggressor, for example, from Russia, for this additional GHG emissions somewhere, I don't know. I understand that it's a long perspective, but is it realistic or not?
Well, first of all, this will be a long shot. So if you talk to lawyers that are familiar with climate change and climate laws, will tell you this is not an easy one. First of all, I think Ukraine is already pushing the territory in terms of ecocide, so the deliberate destruction of the environment by the aggressor. So that would definitely be the first step. But we do see on accountability for climate change, we do some interesting developments. I'm really looking forward now to the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice that is now being prepared, in which the General Assembly of the United Nations asked the ICG to give an opinion whether states are responsible actually for climate change and are responsible for avoiding climate change to happen. Once we have that advisory opinion, if you then connect it with a war crime, so because now emitting emissions is not a crime. If that would be a crime, we would all be criminals here sitting in the room. But if you connect it to a war crime, in this case an act of aggression, then of course it becomes a different story. So again, is it realistic? I think it will be realistic that at some point we will see this connection and maybe even a ruling. Whether you will ever open your bank account and will see money received transferred by the Russian Federation, I'm afraid that chance is very low. But of course, we've seen now with also the frozen assets that there are very, other ways of making Russia pay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Leonard. So I will conclude all key points which was highlighted today. So Alexei, Euro integration is a priority. Is the only alternative, the only option for Ukraine to go on the green way. Svetlana, so we should prioritize our steps, where we go, and in which route. Evgenia, very important key point about education as a foundation of the sustainable development. Victoria, thank you for your input about like a wide dialogue between business, society, and government. Leonard, thank you again for your research. This is great. You're really a big friend of Ukraine, and I know you spend a lot of time in Ukraine. And thank you very much for all support, what you do. And at the end, I just want to say from myself that. You know, investor Warren Buffett have such phrase, something like only when the tide goes out, you will see who is swimming without underwear. Тільки коли відплив відходить, можна побачити, хто купався без білизни. So I think it's also could be connected with sustainable development, because when everything is okay, when markets go up, when you have no war, so you could allow yourself any type of development. So, but if you want to be the winner on the long term, like Warren Buffett, for example, you should make your development sustainable. So, thank you very much. Thank you for our speakers. Please, your applause. And applause. Аплодисменты. Yes. Questions. Okay, so we have a questions. Please, could you give microphone? We have question from the like a handsome guy. Please introduce yourself and give us your question.
Я українською, а якщо можна перекладати, добре?
Можна, звичайно.
Так, дякую.
На яку перекладати?
На яку забажаєте.
Дякую.
Так, щоб всі зрозуміли. Олег Лачук, команда підтримки реформи довкілля. Скажіть, будь ласка, наскільки, на вашу думку, важливі реформи в кліматі під час війни? Наскільки це актуально під час війни? Питання.
Прекрасне запитання. So, Oleg Lachuk, RST team, probably Svetlana, you know Oleg, he's from your team. And the question is, what is the importance of the climate issue, environmental issue during the war? Because every day people dying in Ukraine, and here in Azerbaijan we're talking about climate issues. Is it really important thing?
If I may to ask, we have in our constitution our European pathway, and we are the candidate country. And this document not referring whether it's war or not. Like we need to go that way, and this is why it's important. This is why we're doing. Like if we would like to progress in, like in our pathway to the European Union, we will do this, to the extent we are able to do this. Also, like we have our international obligation according to the Paris Agreement, and this is why we are all gathered here. So, like, if it's our values, it's in our values even during the war. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexei. Some other answers, Svetlana?
In my point of view, the climate issue now, even during the war, it's actually the question of our general surviving as a country. Because if we now will not put the climate perspective in our legislation, in our action, and in our economy, we will be not capable to be competitive in the world, mean that we will never can restore our economy and become a leader. So I think it's a base.
Okay, thank you. Victoria?
Yeah, thank you. Just one more thing to add to that. Yes, one day the war is over, and we will need to recover this way or another, and we will need to, like, the climate change effects will be there as well, and we will need to consider them in the reconstruction materials, in the agriculture, in transport, everywhere. So we will get back to that sooner or later. That, I think, better sooner.
Of course, thank you. Leonard?
Yeah, to me as an outsider, when I started this work, I also felt a bit uncomfortable, like people are dying and I'm talking about emissions of climate change so far away. So I really felt that it was inappropriate to do. But then I contacted my friends in Ukraine, and I said, this was my plan, and they said, yes, of course, do it immediately, show it. So that's my answer. That's your answer, actually, not mine answer, your answer. I've got this question so many times by journalists saying that, this is inappropriate. But for me, when the Ukrainians say this is appropriate, then I feel comfortable.
Thank you, and I will add from myself. Look, climate change, green recovery is a strategic issue, strategic option, and the countries who have no its own strategy became the resource of other countries who have their own strategies. So, of course, the war is terrible, but anyway, we should think in long term. We should think strategically. That's why we do this. Thank you. Some more question? No? Okay, then thank you very much. Thank you for our speakers. Thank you for listening us. See you soon.